Hey everyone, and welcome to my Abbey Road collection video. Now, we are approaching the end of the original UK albums. We've only got one more after this, and that is Let It Be. And for the videos after that, I'll just be showing different albums like reissues or compilations, and also foreign albums. Like, I'll be showing my American collection in the near future. But anyway, today it's Abbey Road. Now, this is the first UK album not to be pressed in mono at all, so all stereo copies from here on out. Right, so let's get started. So here we have the very first pressing from 1969. And of course the important thing to look out for on the very earliest cover is the position of the apple on the back of the sleeve. Now, as you can see, the apple is not aligned with the track listing. It sticks out all the way over here. It's not in this little space. So this is the misaligned apple cover, and this is what the very first pressings came with. And also, the very earliest covers tend to have a little bit more of a greeny tinge to them, but I'll demonstrate that in a minute. And here is the vinyl, and it's on the Apple label, of course. Now, this album doesn't have sold in the UK text at all, so the very first pressings don't have that. And it's got an EMI recording on 2 lines. And the important thing to look out for to show that it's a first press is on side 2. Now, you might notice that at the end of the track listing there is no credit for Her Majesty. And that means it's a first press because the first pressings didn't have Her Majesty on the side 2 label. It was like a hidden bonus track. But you will see that on the later reissues. Now, something I'd just like to point out are the matrix numbers. Now, on the first pressings, the side 1 matrix number is YEX749-2. And then on side 2, the matrix numbers are YEX750-1. Now that's going to be important in a moment. Now here is another copy of the first pressing of Abbey Road with the misaligned apple on the back of the sleeve. However, there is a subtle difference about this copy. And that difference is in the matrix numbers. As on side 1 here, YEX749-3U is the matrix number rather than -2. And on side 2, it's still YEX760-1, that hasn't changed. And this is still the same pressing, as there's no Her Majesty at the bottom of the label on the track listing. And yet, it's got a different side 1 matrix number. Now, that might sound like a very subtle difference. However, this is one of the only copies of this I've seen with that matrix number. So that's actually surprisingly rare. And this copy here is just another first pressing, except that this copy is in a sleeve where the apple is aligned with the track listing. So this is not the earliest form of the sleeve, but it is a first pressing. Now this is quite an interesting copy. This is a variation B of the first pressing, and it's also from 1969. But it's got a difference which is, although fairly subtle, actually very rare to find. Right, so here is the side 1 label. Now there's just something I'd like to draw your attention to, and that is over here. Now, the order is stereo, PCS 7088, the YEX.749, and the published 1969. So that's the order. Stereo at the top, published 1969 at the bottom. So let's turn over onto side 2, and let's have a look at the order now. Now, for some reason, the labels were misprinted for a very short while, so that the order is actually now stereo, YEX, published 1969, and then the PCS right at the bottom. I'll show you side 1 again. So as you can see, the PCS is right underneath the stereo on the side 1, but yet it's at the very bottom on the side 2. So like I say, it's subtle, but it's not actually that easy to find. And it's actually the same on the other side of the label as well. It's an EMI recording, 33 1/3, manufactured in the UK, and then side 1. But on side 2, an EMI recording's at the top, and the 33 1/3 is at the bottom. So that happened on both sides of the label. Bit of a mix up there. And of course this is still first pressing, as there is no Her Majesty credit at the bottom of the label. Okay, so that's all the first pressings out the way with. Now on to the second pressings. Now there are lots of different variations of the second pressing, and I've only got 2 of them, but I've seen at least 5 different versions. But anyway, I'll show you what I have got. So here is the second pressing label. Now it looks very similar to the first pressing. In fact, it's identical on side 1. But on side 2, if you look down here, you can see next to the end, Her Majesty is now credited on the label in the track listing, whereas it wasn't before. Now there is an extremely minor change between this label and the next, and that is purely in the spacing on this part of the label here. Now as you can see, there is clearly no gap between an EMI recording and the 33 1/3, very tightly knit together. Well, that's about to change on the next label. And here is the next label. Now as you can see, there is now a small gap in between an EMI recording and a 33 1/3, very much like the gap here. There's one there now as well. And that's, to be honest, the only real change in this variation. And here is the third pressing, and this was being pressed sort of late 1970 to early 1971. Now also, you can see that after a few years, the colours have lost that original sort of greeny tinge they had on the first copies. So you can see it's a bit lighter on one copy than on the other. You can tell by the sky, that's the best place to tell them, but here's the first pressing in front, and here is the third pressing behind. So here is the third pressing label, and the change in this one is again associated with the 33 1/3. Now it was aligned perfectly before with an EMI recording and manufactured in the UK in side 1, but now it's all the way out in the middle here. And it's the same on side 2 as well. It's also out in the middle. And I'm not really sure why they did that, but that's the new position of it. One last thing I'd like to point out before I move on is how wide the text has been up until this point. So you can see coming together, that's pretty wide text on all the song titles. And the same on side 2. You can see pretty wide. Now that's going to change in a moment. This copy here is just a duplicate of the third pressing.